Hey guys, it's Dan from Soileater and welcome back to our One Take Wednesday series. Today on episode 18, I'm going to be going over different tools and different ways that you can train CQB with your teammates, your friends, anyone, and even spouses, right? So basically, CQB is anytime you're inside a building, right? Close quarter battle. And basically what I'm going to go over today is some ways and some options that you can utilize to train them. All right, so first things first is going to be the location. Hey, where do I train? All right, things to avoid, I guess I'll start off with first. You want to train in an area that's safe, right? You want to train in an area, hopefully that's excluded from other people. So majority of the public's not seeing you run around with guns, especially in this day and age, right? Whether they're airsoft guns, whether they're real rifles that are converted over. You don't want the general public most of the time to see you, right? And if you do, you need to have a bunch of safeties out there that, with vests on and whatnot, letting people know, hey, we're training, signs, law enforcement signs, or just even if you're a civilian, even just training signs like airsoft event. And so I would say this for the civilian side, like look at trying to do some of these MilSim events or some of these airsoft events. Reach out to guys who are in the airsoft community and they should be able to help you out on different events coming up. It's a great way to get some training in. It's a great way to kind of put your kit and put your tactics to test against other people. As far as the law enforcement side, or even just if you're resourceful, right? Because if you don't have the resources, you have to be resourceful. There's a lot of places out there that have a lot of communities out there that have abandoned buildings. Unfortunately, now with the economy, there's plenty of vacant buildings, both residential and commercial. I'm standing right now. This used to be an old, kind of nursing home facility. So it's kind of got that medical facility. The hallways are really large, which again is not going to be your typical residential, but we don't always train in buildings like this, right? So you want to switch it up to have some commercial training for your commercial properties, and then some residential for like search warrants or that sort of thing, or hostage rescue inside a residential home, domestic gone bad, you name the scenario, right? So the locations can be sometimes hard to find, but I think if you go out there and you start asking your local fire department, your local town of buildings that are getting evicted or buildings that are vacant, sometimes you can contact real estate agents and say, hey, we're not going to damage any property and whatnot, can we utilize your building? All right, they might have you sign waivers or whatever else, but just remember, you want to change up your training facilities, right? Most people are not running around, some sweet state preparedness center where you have this huge property that you're allowed to do training on. So you got to go out there and look for them. That would be the first thing. The second thing is, okay, now I have a location. What tools can I utilize to train? So right now I'm just going to start off by kind of showing what we normally use. So right here is just my M4. This is my actual rifle, right? Right here I have a Mantis system in it, but I'll go over that in a minute. So usually for force-on-force training, right, you have your team going against Op 4 or opposition force, basically the bad guys versus the good guys. And what you want to have is some sort of NLTA or non-lethal training ammo. And what that provides is usually, think of it as I'll show it here. Think of that as basically paintball on steroids, right? So these look just like 223 rounds, similar I should say to 223 rounds, 5.56 rounds, but they do not kill you, right? So they're non-lethal training ammo, right? They'll sting, they'll zip through you, they'll break skin and whatnot. So there is some protective equipment you want to use, but there's a lot of companies out there that make conversion kits for your rifles. I've seen them for M4s, I've seen them for the SIGs, and basically any popular weapon platform, there's going to be some sort of conversion kit for your rifles. Now, going into conversion kits, there's a few options out there. The one I would recommend would be some sort of conversion kit that keeps your rifle. So I utilize the rifle that I have every day with my aim point on it, my PEC on it, my Scout Light on it, and it allows me to now transition this over simply by putting this bolt. Let's see if you can see that. There you go. Simply by putting this bolt, so I take out my bolt carrier group and I slide in this bolt carrier group. Obviously check the chamber, make sure the gun's completely unloaded of live ammunition. I insert this, and now this rifle is a non-lethal training rifle, essentially, right? So this rifle now theoretically will only shoot these rounds. It will not shoot live fire rounds. And you can see basically how the bolt face is here. The firing pin comes off to the side, similar to like a rim fire. So it's not a center fire there, right? So I would highly recommend some sort of conversion kit. The other options out there for like an AR platform would be to simply take off the upper and replace it with a non-lethal training upper, right? The reason I don't like that is because now, usually with budget, now I need a different optic, I need a different light and laser, and it just gets very pricey, right? And I'm not trading on the exact same thing, all right? So if you can find a conversion kit, if you can get your team to buy conversion kits, that's the way to go. One thing I'll say with this, right, so this is the rifle I normally run. Most rifle companies out there do not want you to run non-lethal training ammo through their suppressors, right? The tips of those, whether they're marking or non-marking, sometimes have like a colored soap kind of, I'm not gonna show you, you're not gonna be able to see it, but basically a little soap there for marking rounds so you can see where you hit. Some are non-marking, but those can possibly get in your baffles and grunge up your suppressor. So ideally, if I normally run a suppressor, I'll want to take that suppressor off. Well, now I run into the issue where my rifle total length is not where it normally is, right? So although it's good training having force on force, if my rifle is, let's say, 5 inches shorter, I'm not necessarily getting that rep of having to move it in and around door frames, through the threshold, and so on, right? So there's companies like Blue Can, which make this great training aid. So essentially what this does now is it's a piece of aluminum, painted blue, so it's obviously blue usually, especially in law enforcement, is going to be like your non-lethal training ammo and non-lethal training devices. So all this does is it's got a little rubber gasket there. It hooks onto the front of your muzzle device and allows me now to have the same length of pull that I normally would. All right, so simply insert that. When you're done, take it off, put your suppressor on, and you're good to go. All right. One thing I'll say, make sure, guys, you're cleaning your rifles every time after you fire, whether it's UTM, Simunition, there's a bunch of different brands out there that make the stuff. Make sure you're cleaning your rifle after with a guide rod, and especially the bore and the chamber there gets really dirty, especially these little aluminum shavings from the round. So, I would say you're not operational until you clean that rifle, then you're good to go. So for my civilians out there, because of the bullshit ATF rule coming out or whatever is going on with that, they're no longer allowed to sell civilians the UTM training ammo. And if you see right on there, it even says law enforcement military. It's always said that. My guess is why it says that is they're just kind of marketing it to them, because that's usually the majority of their customer base, would be my guess. So again, I think that's BS, just so you're aware of that. I'm totally not on board with that. I think if you're going out there spending your own money and training to try to make yourself a better trained civilian and part of this country, that you should have the options to do that. But don't feel left out. There's other great options out there. I'm going to go over those, right? So the second option I would recommend, if you're on a budget or you can't purchase some of the more expensive stuff, is going to be Airsoft, all right? Airsoft replica rifles, you get one of the licensed rifles, the replica rifles, it is very close to shooting simunitions, right? Especially with some of the feet per second those things come out at. I myself don't have a ton of knowledge on Airsoft, but I will say this, there's plenty of people out there who would be more than willing to give you advice on which rifle to buy. Reach out to one of our dealers over at Evike and ask them, like, hey man, this is what I'm looking for. This is the rifle I currently run. And I guarantee you they'd get you set up with a perfect setup that will allow you to do that. Again, you could put an Airsoft optic on there. You could put an Airsoft PEC on there. The only thing I would probably keep legit would be your Scout Light, your flashlight, but you could also keep your optic or buy like a cheaper SIG optic, something like that, to try to keep that crossover as close as you can. And definitely with the lumens of that light, I'd want something better. But realistically, guys, you could buy a complete Airsoft setup, both rifle and pistol, for, I would say, probably for under 600 bucks. But again, there might be people who correct me. Go ahead and jump in the comments and let me know what a setup like that would be. Just a general M4 with a pistol. Some of these new Glock blowback pistols, they have the CO2 cartridge in the magazine. You can load them up. They actually function exactly like Glock. So the crossover is there, guys. Like, I don't want the stigma of, oh, it's Airsoft. Like, no, it's a training tool, and you're utilizing that training tool to be better at CQB, all right? So just throwing that out there. If you can't afford, you're not allowed, that sounds so stupid, but if you're not allowed to have the UTM, the Simunition, the FX type of conversion kits, get an Airsoft setup, all right? So, and then lastly, the other setup that I'd recommend, if you can't destroy property, so let's say like you're going to, you get a facility, right? And they're like, hey, we can't damage any property. We don't want any brass on the floor or anything like that. I know Jared from Orion Concepts utilizes these in some of their classes, and I'd highly recommend these as well. Right here you have the Mantis Blackbeard system. So all this is, again, you replace the main bolt in your rifle, you insert the laser bolt, and then you insert the battery pack on here. And what this allows you to do, let's see if you can get it behind me. Maybe, yep, on the wall there. So it resets your trigger. So you have a normal trigger reset, and then it also shines a laser, whether it's red or green, depending on what version you get. And now what that allows you to do is get a ton of reps, right? Unlimited reps basically until the battery dies, and you don't damage any property. Your role players don't have to have any protective equipment or whatever targets you have in the rooms, and it allows the instructor to see where you're hitting on that target. Again, something like this is, I think like they're under 250 bucks. So that's another good option. And again, you get to keep your rifle completely the way you normally have it. Also with that is that, what else was I gonna say with it? It's also good for, for dry fire practice, right? So I can practice in my living room, wherever else, doing the dry fire practice, target transitions, and that sort of thing. So the Mantis system is definitely a good training tool for both actually doing CQB as well as dry fire practice for the range. All right, so with all these, most of the time you're gonna want some sort of protection, right, on your body. First thing, at the minimum, recommend a good set of glasses. These happen to be ESS, and you'll notice they have side protection. They kind of wrap around your face. At minimum, guys, you should have these. All right. For the law enforcement, or for the guys, how should I say this? For the guys getting the training in, so the good guys, right? I usually will tell my role players, hey, don't shoot us below the chest. Or, I'm sorry, don't shoot us above the chest. So I don't want to be shot in the face and mouth and that sort of thing. So keep your rounds down below. All right. So most of the time, all of our guys, when we're training, the bad guys know to shoot us chest down, and the good guys can shoot the bad guys wherever they want. And the reason is because they're wearing other protection, which I'll show you in a second. But as the good guys, at a bare minimum, some good eye protection. And then if I'm going against my teammates where I know like they're not overly stressed, they're not gonna shoot me in the face, I won't wear this. But if I'm going to a class or taking a class where I'm not sure how the other students are, I'll wear this protective mask right here. And this protective mask is just an Airsoft one. There's a couple brands that make them, but it's got a metal mesh center on the front. It goes in here, and these hooks right here actually hook right into your Ops Core helmet. So if you look in the back of your helmet, see if I can get those. There we go. So those just clip right into your Ops Core helmet, and it's very quick. You just click both of those in, Velcro the back, and now I've got nose and mouth protection, so I'm not losing any chiclets doing force on force. All right. You can train longer when you're not getting hurt on force, right? You want to be able to feel the mark. So like a t-shirt, usually fine. Like, dude, don't be squeamish. Right? They hurt, but they're not that bad. But again, like maybe long sleeves, because the last thing you want to do is be picking stuff out of your skin and getting infections and that sort of thing, right? So you're going to be able to train harder and longer by having the protective equipment, but don't kind of go to the extreme where now you can't feel the hits and you're all bundled up in Carhartts and whatnot. So I'll show you guys what my bad guys wear. Take care of your bad guys, all right? Whether it's your teammates or not, it's never fun to be the bad guy, right? There's a lot of training value in being the bad guy because it's another sight picture you get on a human target. But just remember like two things. As the bad guy, give your teammates some love and make sure you're exploiting their gaps in between their guys and that sort of thing, right? So as the bad guy, I want to try to exploit their tactics. But give them a couple rounds to show them like, hey man, you messed up, you missed this corner and whatnot. But just try not to hit them in the face, try to hit them chest down. And then as the guy's setting up the training, give them some sort of protective equipment. So this is just an old Carhartt here. If you go to the Salvation Army, you can usually get like some larger coats that are pretty cheap. If you're setting up the program, like you're the guy in charge of training, don't hold back on the expenses if you have the money. Buy like the simunition protective equipment. It looks like motorcycle gear with like mesh, and then it has like joint protection and hand protection, that sort of thing. So they don't get overly hot like they would in a jacket, but it also provides them that protection. And then lastly, I'll go over some of the masks. Now, unfortunately, we don't have some good masks. If you train with companies like Northern Red, they have like the really nice mask, or Will Petty from Centrifuge, he's got the real nice mask for his guys. And I'll tell you what I mean here in a second by that. So this is kind of our old school one. And you'll see here, it's just kind of foam. It's like probably half-inch thick, spacer mesh foam in here. And then it's got a pair of hard goggles in here. These fog up pretty easily, so it's very difficult to see if you're the bad guy for a while. And then also, if you get shot in the top of the head here, you're gonna have some serious welts on the top of your scalp there. So we've all kind of gone through these and got hit with these. So I probably would not recommend this, all right? The next one is, this one's from FX. So this one's got a hard protection on the top, as well as a full hard face. This one's good. Both of these don't provide any neck protection, so you're kind of exposed there. they do make neck protectors and stuff. That's what I'm saying. When you're ordering this stuff, if you have the money, buy the actual protective equipment. And then the one that like Northern Red has and whatever else, like the newer models, I should say, is a full face. So it almost looks like from the movie like Prometheus, I believe it was, where it's a full face visor. So you can actually see the role player's facial expressions. And for guys who have done CQB long enough, you know that like facial expressions are part of the discrimination process, right? Like what's their demeanor, you know? So as far as the discrimination process, like demeanor is definitely a big part of it. And being able to see their face helps a lot with that. And then lastly, what I'll say is, you want to buy enough protective equipment so that not just the bad guys have it, right? So if you're doing CQB with your team or CQB, you know, with whoever, you want to make sure that the role players, all of them, so the unknowns, the hostages, and the suspects all look similar for the most part, right? You don't want to have everyone with clear eye pro and then the bad guy's always wearing the black mask. It's like, well, there's no real discrimination then other than, hey, that guy's got a black mask. So make sure that your role players or at least your unknowns have the protective gear on too, so that it makes your guys have to discriminate those targets. All right. Lastly, we'll go over some of the other things that I'd recommend for training. So I'd recommend medical gear, like training medical gear. Hopefully if you watch some of my other videos, you know that every couple of years, or at least every couple of years, but hopefully every year, you guys are training out your med equipment, right? Make sure you have a whole setup of old medical equipment that you can switch over for training scenarios, right? So like this tourniquet right here, this one actually I just took off my kit. So in that last video, I replaced it. So you can see here, just a standard Gen 7, there we go, cat tourniquet. Now, what I didn't do yet, which I will do today after this video, is take a piece of painter's tape and tape 2 pieces of blue painter's tape on this windlass. And what this allows me to do now is know that this is my training one. I keep them all together anyway, but that allows me to know that if I accidentally forget to remove this after the training, that I can look down and be, oh, that's the wrong tourniquet, right? This one's in good functioning condition, but if you have the money, buy the blue ones. If not, I would recommend just wrapping it with painter's tape so that you know, hey, I need to swap this out. So ideally in these scenarios, right, utilize your training equipment. You don't want to utilize your good stuff, right? Unless you have a crazy budget, but I don't. So that's that for medical. As far as flashbangs, there's a few options out there, right? So IWA makes some civilian training bangs or civilian bangs that you can use. They're a little pricey, but they work pretty well. There's other companies out there that make like electronic bangs or some that utilize shotgun primers. I don't have a ton of experience with those, but I would say this, like whatever you're using, get the reps on it as best you can. My team specifically runs CTS mini bangs compared to like Def Tech. So we happen to run CTS mini bangs. This right here is a spent bang. If you talk CTS, they'll tell you don't do this. And I agree with them, but we just don't have the money to buy them. So this is a bang that was utilized on training or on an op. And essentially I just wrapped it with painter's tape to know, obviously it's a dead bang. There's also no spoon on it and there's also no pin, right? So realistically, if I draw this bang and deploy it, I'm not gaining the training rep of pulling the pin and releasing it and having the spoon pop out and whatnot. And there's also no audible noise on this. So usually what we'll do is we'll pull these out, kind of go through the motion like you're pulling it, throw it, and then a second and a half later, bang, right? So it's kind of lame that you kind of lose some of the training value. CTS, is, I'm sure other companies do too, make training bangs. So there's specific training bangs. What those do is they'll have, usually they're blue bangs with threading top on it. So you'll have the spoon and the pin on a reusable, basically fuse. So you can get the rep of pulling the pin, throwing the bang, it will pop after 1.5 seconds. And then all you need to do when that scenario is done is you unscrew the top, grab a new one, put a new one on it, and you have another fresh bang. So I'd recommend doing that. They're a little more hearing safe compared to an actual bang, so your role players aren't getting beat up pretty bad. And it's just, again, it's for longevity of training, right? The goal is to not blow your ears, not get hurt at training so that you can actually train harder and train more, all right? Lastly, we'll go over some pistols. So for the longest time, my team just didn't have the money to buy, simunition or FX pistols. So this one is a 17T FX. This one's by FX, and I'll talk about this in a second. But so what we were doing for a long time, which was really stupid, and I do not recommend it, is we were clearing our actual pistols, putting a piece of caution tape in there, and then holstering them. So we had empty pistols, so you could draw and get one click. But what ended up happening, first of all, it's super unsafe, and I kind of rather not have any at all because it's a functioning gun. So if you insert a real magazine, it's a functioning gun, right? The other reason why I didn't like it is guys knew subconsciously that, hey, that gun's not actually going to shoot the bad guy. So they weren't switching. They were just reloading their simunition rifle. And it led to some training scars. So luckily we finally got the budget to be able to purchase the training Glocks. The only thing I'll say with these, although these are easy to get because they're straight from Glock and it's a Glock 17T FX, these jam all the time. The other option out there is Simunitions makes another one that's just the receiver on your gun, and I believe you can mount, don't quote me on this, but I believe you can mount red dots and stuff on there. So I'd recommend checking those out other than the FX ones, just because they don't jam as much. But again, these fire, you can get marking or non-marking, and then there's other ammunition out there which is pretty cool for like for kind of doing defensive tactics or like grappling, where the gun will function but nothing comes out. So it basically just functions the gun and nothing comes out. So there's a lot of different safety stuff in there. Remember, read the owner's manual and all this stuff. As far as simunitions, as far as how far you can shoot them, like what's a safe distance is. 5 feet for us is kind of what we do, but it might be a little less than that. But I mean, you're kind of beating up your guys pretty good if you're shooting them that close. Other things too is when you're buying the ammunition, be aware that there's different types of ammunition, right? So there's marking, which means it has a little green tip or different colored tip on the side of it. Let's see if I can show you here. Maybe it's still, there we go. So on the tip there, you'll see that's green, and inside there's a little piece of, it's a little like green tape, or I'm sorry, green like paint. So that's one option. There's others that are just rounded, and those are just non-marking, so they don't mark up the walls or the targets or people. And then there's other, the other ones that I want you to stay away from when you're actually shooting other people are the black tip ones. So those are the high velocity ones. And I've seen those zip right through a Carhartt and actually break someone's phone that was in the Carhartt pocket. So it went through there and dented the back of an iPhone and actually broke the iPhone. So they come out of there pretty quick. One guy got hit in his pig gloves, SKD pig gloves with the padding. So it went through the padding and actually got lodged into his finger. He had to have our medic pull it out with tweezers. So again, you don't want to get hurt training. You want to feel the round so that it's like kind of punishment for like, hey, I missed my sector, or someone missed, they're clear, but you don't want to get hurt with it. All right. That's all I got for you guys. Remember to keep your non-lethal training stuff, like your force on force stuff, separate in a separate container. So I just use an old like PVS 14 night vision bag, but keep it separate. Make sure there's never any live stuff in there, and make sure you guys are doing definitely do a safety check, right? So at least one. I would prefer to do two, so one during each scenario, ideally before big scenarios. There's law enforcement deaths yearly because of training accidents, right? So law enforcement as well as civilians. So make sure, guys, whatever you do, that you're training safe. Make sure you're doing a proper safety check, so going through everyone's full kit, and then make sure they're not allowed to leave that training area. Keep all live stuff in a separate area, and then don't forget to, after a break, after a piss break, after lunch, that you're rechecking. All right, so hopefully this gave you some options that you can utilize for training with CQB and doing some force on force. If you have any questions, put them down below in the comments, and I'll see you next week. Take care.